Every NBA season is just packed with incredible plays, unbelievable drama, the whole thing. But while the game on the court is always changing, always getting better, the way we talk about the game, it feels like we're stuck in a loop, just repeating the same old broken arguments. And it usually kicks off with a hot take that sounds a little something like this.
You've seen this a million times online, right? At first glance, it just looks like a simple who would win debate. But it's actually a symptom of a much, much bigger issue with how we talk about basketball. Is the real problem here one team versus another, or is it something else entirely?
And that's exactly what we're going to dig into. We're going to pull back the curtain on the flawed logic and, the cognitive biases that turn what should be fun debates into these endless, unwinnable arguments. Okay, first up, let's talk about something we all fall for, the nostalgia trap. It's this powerful tendency we have to think the era of basketball we grew up with was the absolute peak, the golden age. And, well, it often makes us unfairly dismiss the amazing stuff happening right in front of our eyes. And here's the crazy part. This cycle is spinning faster and faster. The very same fans who grew up in the 2010s, who used to roll their eyes when older fans dismissed their heroes, are now doing the exact same thing to this new crop of stars. It's like we've all become the old heads we used to make fun of. So how does this actually play out? Well, you see it all the time with the excuses. The goalposts for what makes a team great are always on the move for today's teams. Just look at the Thunder this year. First the knock was, they're too young, too inexperienced. Then they dominate the regular season, and suddenly, the regular season doesn't matter. Then they gut out a tough playoff series, and it becomes, they barely beat a mid-team. It never ends. And want to see a perfect example of this in action? Let's rewind a bit. Back in 2016, when the 73-win Warriors lost in the finals, the immediate reaction was brutal. Their historic season was supposedly worthless. They were called frauds. But look at how we talk about that same exact team today. Now, they're the gold standard, the blueprint for modern excellence. This is the nostalgia trap in its purest form. Time has a way of washing away the sting of failure and making legends seem even bigger. Our perception completely changes. So this whole thing about romanticizing the past, it leads us right into our next big problem. It's what some people call the GOAT debate's original sin. And it all goes back to how one man's shadow has shaped and maybe distorted how we see greatness. This is a really sharp take from analyst Nick Wright. He basically argues that for years and years, when people asked, who's the next GOAT, they weren't really asking who the best player was. The subconscious question, the real question was, who's the most like Mike? See, Michael Jordan was so dominant, so iconic, that he didn't just set the bar, he became the bar. He created this blueprint. Suddenly, greatness wasn't just about winning. It had to look a certain way. You had to be a scoring first guy, be incredibly athletic, move with a certain grace, and just, project this aura of a world breaker. And if you don't fit that blueprint, well, you get penalized, even if you're an all-time great. Think about Tim Duncan, one of the greatest winners ever. But his quiet, fundamental dominance never quite fit the flashy mold, so he often got overlooked in those top-tier chats. And we're seeing it right now with Nikola Jokic. His game is revolutionary, but because it doesn't look like the Jordan ideal, some people just can't wrap their heads around his historic impact. Okay, so if the GOAT debate is kind of broken, maybe we should talk about something more nuanced, like influence. And here, there's a really useful way to think about it, a framework for understanding how different players leave their mark on the game. And to get our heads around this, I'm going to throw a question at you that might sound a little nuts at first. Who had more influence on the game, James Harden or Steph Curry? Now hold on, I know what you're thinking. But the answer shows us there are two totally different kinds of impact. So James Harden, he had what we'd call micro-influence. He fundamentally changed how individual players score. The step back, the foul drawing, that whole ISO-heavy style, you can see his fingerprints all over the league because his moves are replicable. But Steph is macro-influence. He's a singularity. He didn't just give players new moves, he broke the entire defensive geometry of basketball. He changed the game itself. All right, so we've been talking about all these abstract ideas, nostalgia, blueprints, influence. But let's connect all this to something very real, something that is actively making the game we love kind of frustrating to watch. I'm talking about the end of close games. 10, that's it. Just 10 seconds left on the clock in a super tight, exciting game between OKC and the Spurs not too long ago. I mean, this should be the absolute best part of basketball, right? The thrilling climax. But get this. Those 10 seconds of game time, they took 12 minutes of our actual lives to play out. It was just a brutal, torturous slog of a foul, then a timeout, then a commercial, then another foul. Like, it completely sucks all the energy and excitement out of the moment. I mean, just look at the raw numbers here. It's ridiculous. In just the last 25 seconds of that game, we had 20 fouls and 24 substitutions. All that strategic stopping and starting, all that maneuvering, and for what? There wasn't a single lead change in that entire stretch. It's become this agonizing war of attrition. And all of this kind of brings us to one big, important question. We obsess over who's better, whose era was the best. We become obsessed with winning the argument. But has that same win-at-all-costs mentality bled into the game itself? Has our need to win every debate, to optimize every single possession, started to actually ruin the flow and the beauty of the sport we're all here to enjoy? It's definitely something to think about.